Hey guys, it's Julian, and today I'm super excited to be showing you the much requested how to make techno like Klangkuenstler. If I pronounce it wrong, I apologize. I'm American. As usual, you can get the project file and samples and MIDI and presets, all of that stuff from this video in the description. And if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there because it's already available and it has been since yesterday. And yeah, let's dive in. So we're at 131 BPM. The first sound we have here is the kick, which sounds like this. So here's the kick. You can hear it. It's a pretty standard sort of rumble kick. The main thing with this one is like the type of kick you use. Like for this video, the main kick, or like the dry kick I should say, that I made, I tried to get one that was a little bit more like kind of low mid-rangey, as you can hear. Like it has this very particular kind of place that it sits in the mix. And so if you want to make techno in the style, this is what you want to look for. It's more of like an old school type of kick. Like this reminds me a lot more of like late 90s techno than it does anything else. But yeah, first effect we got on here is just a bit of saturation. This is going before the rumble even, just giving it a bit more fatness, kind of bringing it out a bit more. Here's without this. And then with it. So you would actually hear the difference between having those two things on in the club and like when you're hearing this in a proper track, I feel like. After that, we have this audio effect track, which is doing the rumble. You can see we've got two chains here. We got a dry chain, and then we have this wet chain. And the wet chain is where we have the rumble. So what we got going on here is we have a delay. As you know, to make a rumble, you use either a delay or a reverb, and then we have that going into some distortion. And then you can hear that gives us this like rumbly kind of intense sound, and then we just take that and filter it down, and there you go, you get just the rumble. Now this one I did it a little bit differently because you can see I've got a bit of an EQ8 going into the distortion, so this is just boosting the lawn, making it a bit fatter and making it so the rumble is just going to be a bit stronger coming out of the amp. And then what I've also got on here is after the low pass filter, I've got a compressor side chaining it to the dry kick, so it doesn't get in the way of that, and then also so it doesn't get in the way of that, I've got an EQ8 here cutting at 100 Hz as well as boosting the low end just to make the low end a bit stronger and to cut out 100 Hz. That's typically where the punch of the kick is hitting. And yeah, so I'll close that. After that rack, what we've got is a bit of drum bus. This just glues it all together, really makes it sound like one thing. Here's without it. And then with it, with a lot of these videos where I find people making these rumble kicks, they kind of just like stop after this stage. And you can hear that's not really going to sound right in the track. It doesn't really stand out that much. It's not going to really hit the way you need it to. So that's where this drum bus comes in. This glues the punch to the rumble and just makes it like really, really hit. I've also got the transients up a bit, so just kind of bringing out the attack there. And then the only other effect on there is just a bit of EQ8. This is the last thing that you really need, because you can hear if I turn this off, it has the impact, but it's not really the sound. So you can hear this is just focusing the kick. This is taking it and focusing it on this punch in the mid-range, as well as boosting the low end, and then cutting out a bit of muddy stuff from the low mid-range at 235 Hz. And yeah, that is it for the kick. Next thing we have here are these hi-hats, which sound like this. So what we've got going on is we have kind of like two types of hi-hats. We have this one, just playing on the 16th notes, and then these two layers, which are playing on the upbeats. So with the one that's playing on the 16th notes, you can see this is just made using operator. It's just like this. You can see I've got the velocities kind of going up and down like that. And yeah, what this is just a bit of white noise going into a bandpass filter. Really simple sound. This is a really great way to make hi-hats for the style, though. I've noticed in a lot of these style of techno tracks, they have kind of a more mid-rangey hi-hat like this. And this allows you to just kind of dial in like perfectly what you want. So you can get this, because this doesn't really sound like a hi-hat sample. When I was listening to a lot of his tracks, and like I said, just a lot of tracks in this style, it doesn't sound like they're just using a simple hi-hat sample. A lot of times it sounds like this is what they're doing to get a more mid-rangey sound like this. The only effect I have on there is a bit of saturation. This just kind of helps to take it away from sounding like a dry synth. And makes it more like a drum. And yeah, that is it for that first hi-hat. And then the next one is this. which is 2 layers. What we have here is we have a 909 hi-hat. It's a very popular sound in techno. I'll show you the sample I started with. Is that one. So you can hear really straightforward 909 hi-hat, and then what I did was I pitched it down. So this gives you that really deep, kind of fatter 909 hi-hat like you've heard in a lot of tracks like this. And then the other layer on top of that is this other operator hi-hat here, which sounds like this. You can hear it's just adding a bit of like sizzle, or like that on top of the sound. This is made just the same as another one. You can see we've got some white noise going into a bandpass. Yeah, this just adds, like I said, a little bit of sizzle on top of the sound because this has a lot of fatness to it. But it doesn't really have anything super bright to it. So when we add in this layer, there we go. And then on the group of hi-hats, I have a bit of processing as well. This really helps to tie them all together. A lot of times I get questions like, how do you make your hi-hats or your percussion sound like it's all kind of in the same world or like it's all coming from the same place? And a lot of people think the secret to that is just to find samples from the same place, but that's actually not it. What it really is just comes down to how you process them all together, because when you put everything through the same processing, it's going to get a more kind of like similar and cohesive texture just by virtue of the fact that everything is going through the same effect at once and getting that exact same thing. So I'll show you what I mean. Here's without this. And then with it, you can hear it also just makes everything a lot more punchy and a lot more powerful in the mix. So the first thing here is this drum, as you can see. This is going pretty strong. I've got this on the hard setting, got the drive up, got the crunch up. We've also got the transients up quite a bit to make it really hit. This is just kind of what you need to do to really make, like I said, to really get that strength in the hi-hats like you hear in these kinds of tracks. And then the other effect we have on there is an EQ8, which is cutting out the low end and then boosting the high end, just for some like clarity. And sort of clean the hi-hats up a little bit. And yeah, that is it for the hi-hats. The next sound we have here is the lead, which sounds like this. So I'll talk about the notes first. You can see this is 2 layers, but with the notes, the main thing to keep in mind is it's actually really simple. If I fold this really quick, or it's already folded, you can see really this is mostly just C sharp. That's the key we're in, is C sharp minor. And then just like simple notes from the C sharp minor scale. Like for example, we've got G sharp, the 5th, A, which is just one note up from the 5th, B, which would be the minor 7th, and then we have this D up here. Yeah, just kind of like simple, dark, sort of like old school ravey type of stuff. It's not really that complicated, but then what makes this really good is the rhythm, like the way that it's all kind of bouncing around in the 16th note thing here. Because you can hear, like, if I take these notes and we just do, say, like, it's really simple notes. Like I said, it's not complicated to write these out. And the way I would recommend starting a pattern like this, like the way I wrote this one actually, was basically I started with C sharp here. So I just made a bunch of C sharps. We'll shorten those a little bit. And then you can just start playing around with notes in the scale. Like maybe that one will just go up an octave. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This one will go up to the 5th. That one will go up that note. You can see it starts to come together pretty quickly when you do it this way. But yeah, so those are the notes. For the sound, I've got 2 layers, like I said. The first one is this main layer, which is made with analog, and it sounds like this. So what this is it's 2 saw waves in analog. Like I said, they're an octave apart, detuned a little bit. I've also got a bit of white noise on there to kind of give it some brightness. We've got the amp envelope set like this, and then I've just got a bit of unison to make it kind of a bit bigger and give it the super saw sort of sound. After that, I have this chorus. This also helps to make the sound bigger. Chorus is definitely a good effect to make your sounds like bigger and more full sounding, and like just really have that presence like you want with this kind of sound. After that, we have a bit of reverb to give it some space, and then just a bit of saturation. This really helps to make this sound fat. If I turn this off, you can hear like it's just not really quite there. But then when we turn it on, it gives it that intensity and makes it really sound as full as possible. And then the last effect on there is just an EQ8 cutting out the low end and boosting the mid-range and the high end a little bit. Yeah, that is it for the main lead. And then the second layer sounds like this. So this one's playing the same MIDI. This is just meant to be more of like a wider stereo layer to kind of fill the sound out. You can see I've got a super saw here inside of wavetable. I've got 2 saw waves an octave apart. I've got the amp envelope set like this, and then I've got the unison on here. So I used wavetable because the unison inside of analog actually isn't stereo, it's just mono. But this one allows you to get that super wide stereo, super saw sound. You can see I've got the voices and the amount all the way up. So this is just like super intense, sort of like hardstyle type of sound. I've got a bit of chorus on that to spread it out a bit, as well as a bit of reverb and some saturation. Same stuff that was on the other layer. And then I've got this Haas effect here. So what this is doing is this is what's giving the sound that wide kind of stereo image. What the Haas effect is basically you take a sound, split it into the left signal and the right signal, and you push it ever so slightly forward. It would literally be the same thing as if I did this. Like I'll make a second layer of this and pan each one completely to the left and right. And then if we just move this one like a tiny amount forward, like this maybe, it would be that same effect. That might be a little bit too much. You'd probably want to zoom in and do it a little bit more, but that's all it is. It's just taking a sound, splitting it into the left and right signal, and then pushing one of them forward a little bit, and then you get this wide stereo image because you're hearing the same thing at 2 slightly different times in each ear. So the way I'm doing this here is using an audio effect rack. This is a little bit more of an efficient way to do it. You can see we've got a right chain and a left chain, and then on the left chain I've got this delay, which is 100% wet, and then I have no feedback. So it's just doing one delay basically. And you can see I've got it at 10 milliseconds. So I know between like 10 and like 70 or 80 milliseconds I find works. Anything after that, you start to just kind of like, it becomes kind of obvious what's happening. But yeah, that is that. And then the last thing we have on there is just an EQ8 cutting out the low end and giving it a little bit of a high-end boost, and that is it for the second lead layer. And then on the group, I have a bit of processing as well. This is what ties it all together, just like with those hi-hats, and makes it all sound like one lead. I'll show you here is without the group processing. I'll keep the auto pan on so you still hear the side chain. And then with it, so you see, like, it sounds big when you don't have it on, but then you hear how much of a difference it is when you do turn the stuff on, and how much of a difference it makes just in terms of, like I said, like making it all sound cohesive and tight and like one layer. So the first thing here, just a bit of chorus, just kind of giving everything like a similar sort of texture there. This really helps for making it all sound like one, like it kind of makes it obscures the space between both of them, I find. And yeah, after that we have a bit of drum bus. This is just tying these together. And this really works as like that glue to make it all really fat as well. And the thing with this one is you'll notice these are coming out pretty hot from the synths. Like, if you look, the second one actually is clipping a little bit there, which doesn't really matter because it's all going through this stuff anyway. But yeah, so this is kind of like a lesson on not going too crazy with your effects. Like a lot of times, with a lead, I would just take a drum bus and just put the hard setting on, start turning the drum and crunch up a lot, maybe even turn up the transients. But because these are already so loud and so full, you don't need that much. Like doing that much would just make it not sound that good. But this is the perfect amount to where it's still a pretty big difference in terms of what it's adding, but it's just not going to be so crazy because these are already so loud coming out of the synth. So yeah, just kind of like, being mindful about that and not just, going full force with everything. A lot of times you can get that full force sound in a more controlled and sort of calculated way like this. And then the only other effects I have on there are this auto pan. This is just doing sort of like a fake sidechain or like a simulated sidechain, I guess I should call it. Think of this kind of like the same as like Kickstart or LFO Tool, like one of those plugins where you're just kind of shaping the volume and it simulates a sidechain because it's doing that quarter note like pulse like that. But this way you can do it with just the Ableton stuff. And then the last thing on there is just this EQ8 cutting out the low end and boosting the high end a little. Just kind of cleaning the sound up a little bit. And that is it for the lead. And then the last thing that we have here is this bass, as I called it. So what this is it's just playing this like on 16th notes on C sharp, and you can hear more so like what this is adding to the track when I turn it off. So here is with it in the mix, and then without it. Here there's just not really as much of like that intense rhythm anymore when we turn it off. That's what this is adding. This is adding just more intensity, more kind of like power to the overall groove. And yeah, so what this is it's just made using analog. I just have 2 saw waves an octave apart going into a low pass with an envelope on it. I've also got a little bit of an LFO, moving the filter frequency just to make it have some movement like that and make it not just all stay in the same place the whole time. And then I've got a bit of unison on the synth like that as well. You can hear that just makes it a bit fatter and kind of more full sounding. And then after that we have the saturator as well as this drum bus. So these are both working together to fatten the sound up. Here's without them, and then I'll turn them on one by one. So the saturator is really just making it a bit more warm and a bit more like analog and full sounding. And then the drum bus is really what takes it and makes it like hit. It makes it really full. And this is important. If you don't have this be fat enough, it's not going to stand up in the mix because this is really like a background element. So you kind of have to fight for its space in the mix. But yeah, then after that, I've got a bit of auto pan, again doing that simulated sidechain effect. And then the last thing on here is an EQ8. And this is pretty much a no-brainer, you know, just cutting out the low end, of course, making room for the kick, and also cutting out a bit of mud in the mid-range here. But with this one, it's all about the finesse. If you listen to this with the kick, they fit together pretty well. And honestly, they could fit together pretty horribly if you don't really know what you're doing. Like, the thing that I found is that you need to be really careful about where you're high passing this, because if you do it too low, you can hear, you know, now they're clashing at 100 hertz, but if you do it too high, this isn't really going to add that much intensity. It's just going to kind of blend in with the hi-hat. So it's all about getting that perfect spot, you know, where you're still getting the fat low mid-range in it, and you can hear it in the mix, but it's not going to be taking over the space where the kick is. And so with that, that's me for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. And let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Like I said in the beginning, you can get the project file and samples, a MIDI and presets, all of that stuff from this video in the description. And if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there because it's already available. Yeah, thank you so much, guys, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.